how do I stop comparing and start being inspired by? Because actually, I think there's a fine line between being really envious of someone and actually being like, oh, I'm inspired, I'm going to go and do that.
Agree. Emma, I would love it if you'd be kind enough to share with us, some of the things that you do to help shift yourself out of comparison if you ever get there.
Yeah, so I think that you struggle to compare yourself when you really know a person. I don't know about you, but comparison for me is like seeing one picture on Instagram with no context.
Yes.
Like someone getting a new handbag, or who knows whether that person has just worked really hard for it.
Yes.
Or maybe it was a gift, or maybe it wasn't. Whatever the backstory is of something, you immediately don't compare because you know more about it. And I think the hole that I sometimes fall into is just scrolling and scanning and seeing something and immediately it triggering me and being like, well, I want that. But when you actually sit down and talk to someone, it's very hard for you to compare yourself to them, I think. So, for example, having my podcast, so I've interviewed over like 100 amazing, incredible, successful creatives, yourself included. And so, though that's 100 people I could easily compare myself to, but instead I've befriended them, I've interviewed them, I've promoted them, I've lifted them up and actually have got so much out of it. And actually a lot of people have said recently that like I got a few messages the other day and just in person people are like, I really like your podcast because it's not about you, it's celebrating other people and actually
compliment.
And like thank you for leading the way of how to actually do that and support other people and especially support other women, because I think, I don't want to generalise, but I think there is still like a weird competitive thing with women in the media. It's like the whole one job thing. It's like, no, there's jobs for all of us now. It's not like back in the 1920s. But obviously that mentality, because women haven't been in the workplace as long as men, we're still like scrapping with each other to get the roles. So I think, listening to other people's stories and promoting their work and recommending books and go and check out this person's thing, actually, that's the opposite of comparison. That's like, I'm happy enough in myself and in my work to shout about you for 40 minutes. And I think that's really helped me.
Gosh, that is so cool as well, because it's true. And how can comparison get a look in when you're in that story with that person, when you're there face to face, when as well, kind of dissolving the comparison around that, cutting off its oxygen? Because I've also found that when you are kind of being straight up with someone, you are face to face with them, it's really hard to compare yourself because your heart doesn't want to feel comparison. Your heart wants to connect with that person.
Exactly. And I don't think you can compare yourself to someone that you really love. Like I just think, I'm not to say that I'm deeply in love with all my podcast guests, but I do to some extent like love what they do.
And like I'm behind you, I support you. And it's interesting you say that actually, because I used to find myself, because I would say I kind of like work in the wellness industry, and the wellness industry is pretty kind of like, there's a bias to women, as you might expect, and I used to find myself really kind of getting quite bitchy to myself. Well, this is the thing, I wouldn't say it to anyone, I'd just like swallow this poison myself and be like, she doesn't have the right to do that, how dare she have that, and like I was kind of like judge, jury and executioner. And then I kind of felt like, hold on a second, like this is the patriarchy in action. And so like now one of my most sacred mantras is I don't judge how another woman feeds her family and how she earns her money.
Yes.
Because like there for the grace of God go I. I've had to do all sorts of things to like pay my phone bill, because I don't know about you, but my landlord does not care if I'm fulfilled at work. Thankfully I am, but they just do not care. And I think it's kind of really realising that we can get behind people, and that if they are generating great things for themselves, absolutely brilliant. But I also notice that the way that I can kind of dissolve comparison is that if I'm feeling good in myself, and if I feel like I'm in alignment with where I want to be, or I know where I want to be, I feel comparison much less too. I don't know if you kind of find the same when you're kind of feeling like, you know what, as far as paths go, this is where I want to be walking. Like, does that affect things for you too?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it sounds really cliche, but even if someone is doing something similar to you, they're not doing what you're doing. I do think we're all individuals, and I think no one can write your story. Like, we're all very different deep down. And so I think, the more I get to know someone, the more I just compare myself less to them, I think. But I've been reading obviously a lot of Brené Brown.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's someone that I think a lot of people watch. You know, the TED Talk was like the gateway drug into the Brené Brown world. And
when you're in.
Oh, and there was just something that she was saying about how we make up a lot of stories. Like, a lot of what we think isn't true. And so actually what I've, you know, done and tried to do is learn more about people and behind the scenes, like what they've been doing, and share more of my story, the backstory of what I'm doing, because that stops you from just like making up random things and linking things together when it's not necessarily true. Like, we don't know how someone has achieved what they've achieved, and if you actually dig a little bit deeper, you can just be inspired by it and not compare. And I know that we spoke about this. And also, when you did your Stylist Live talk that I came to, I remember there was someone in the audience who asked the question. So it was a really interesting question where she said, how do I stop comparing and start being inspired by? Because actually, I think there's a fine line between being really envious of someone and actually being like, oh, I'm inspired, I'm going to go and do that.
Agree. Yeah, and I think as well, it's kind of just recognising that it can, even when you compare yourself to someone, it can feel radical to even think they could be inspiring, because the gross, funky, jealousy, envy stuff is just too much of a lens to look through. But if you move it out the way, and you know, rather than seeing life as kind of something where people are just taking things away from you, look at it like one big Pinterest board, like a walking Pinterest board. What a great flat, what a nice bag, she seems really happy. It's even by being open to considering that this content could be available to us, this stuff, these feelings, these experiences could be available to us, that already will kind of take one claw off the grip that comparison can have.
Yeah, and I do think that if an opportunity hasn't come my way yet, it wasn't the right opportunity for me necessarily at that time. And I think that's more of a challenge and more of a exciting adventure to go and get it. Like, you work more on what you need to do to get that, rather than thingy got it and I didn't. Well, maybe you need to do a bit more to get there.
Absolutely. And it's like, you know, if the elevator's broke, just use the stairs. Because I think that's another thing that's become really, really obvious to me as I've kind of seen behind the scenes of the entrepreneurial world and the creative world. No one gets to skip the work. No one gets, you know, it can be easier for people, it can be swifter. They will have had to do their assignment, their work somewhere else, or it's on the way. So I think, you know, if we were all just a lot more accepting of each other too, we would go a lot further.
Because it's not like, unless you're twins, and even with twins, I mean, I don't know anything about twins in comparison, but that's a whole other thing. But if you weren't born in the same house, grew up in the same environment, and I mean, no one is on a level playing field. We're all different. So comparison is just, it's such a waste of time.
It really is.
It's like, we're not the same person. I mean, sibling comparison is another whole other thing, but I know that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I know. But that's true as well, isn't it? In terms of, there's just so many ways comparison can get in.
Yeah.
Emma, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Could you please tell everyone at home how they can find out about you?
I really wanted to do the whole give it a thumbs up. If you want to hear more from Lisa Sheridan, subscribe to her YouTube channel. Thumbs up. Give it a like.
So where can we find out about you, Emma? Where can we follow your work?
So you can find me at emmagannon.co.uk. You can find me on iTunes under Control-Alt-Delete the podcast, and you know, Instagram, Twitter, I'm floating around on there as well. It's just Emma Gannon on Twitter, Emma Gannon UK on Instagram. Thank you.
She's so worth a follow, because it's funny, I kind of started following Emma on Twitter and I thought, oh, what a cool girl, and then now to call you a pal, it's just such a, like, it's such a cool,
I love
cool
it.
thing.
This is the one good thing about the internet.
Yeah.
Friendship.
Thanks, Emma. That was amazing.
Thank you.